Unlike last episode, this one's gonna be a little violent and bloody. Just 5 days after the last piece of evidence was located over in Edison, Georgia, this thing or things reappear. But this time 35 miles to the northeast of Edison, near the town of Braunwood. On August 1st of 1955, 19-year-old forestry worker Joseph Charles Whaley of Dawson, Georgia, was to cut down the grass in front of the road signs inside the forested section of the Braunwood-Smithville Highway, known today as Highway 118. Joseph began slicing the grass with a razor-sharp scythe. During his swaths at the grass, he heard this ruckus near him in the forest thicket down by the Kinchanoofie Creek. As he stood butted up against the tree line, he heard something rattling in the bushes. The curiosity of what it was got the best of Joseph, and he began to venture into the forest to see what the culprit of the noise was. As he swayed his head back and forth, trying to find an angle to peer through the foliage, something, at least 6 foot tall, came out towards him, grunting like a wild pig. Joseph described this figure to the newspapers as, quote, built something on the order of a man. It reminded me of a gorilla. However, it had tusk-like teeth and pointed ears, shaggy gray hair all over like a wired-haired terrier dog. Now, this thing didn't move fast at all, but Joseph froze or something, because this thing closed the gap and was able to get right up on Joseph. And even though the thing had not taken a strike at Joseph, he decided to take the initiative. This is how he described the fight to the United Press. Quote, I swung at him with the blade and missed. I swung a second time and hit him on the right hand or paw. I hit him again on the hand, and then on the chest. Even though this thing moved super slow and Joseph was much more agile, the pig-faced beast was a juggernaut and would not quit coming for Whaley. Before Whaley ran out of breath, he disengaged and he ran for his Jeep. He jumped in and he watched the force from where he ran, and the thing was still in there, so he grabbed the radio and started calling in for help, but he got no response. Rather than stick around, Whaley decided to leave, and as he reached for the ignition, he was blindsided. Quote, something hit me on the left shoulder, tore my shirt, and left 3 scratches on my shoulder. The pig-faced ape thing had walked down the tree line and had emerged from behind the Jeep, possessing the shocking ability to ambush, or there was a second one. In order to avoid being torn apart, Joseph had to leap out the passenger side of the Jeep. He began to use the Jeep as a shield as they circled around it. Whaley kept watching down the highway for a car to come, or the beast to simply tire out and go back into the forest. But this thing would not quit. It was determined to get Whaley. Because the pig face was, quote, lumbering and slow-moving, Joseph decided to lure it back into the woods. With that, Joseph turned and ran into the woods, while the slothful moving beast did its best to give chase. Once Joseph got him deep enough into the woods, Joseph managed to circle back and run as fast as he could to the Jeep, while this thing came after him, grunting and screaming. Joseph started up the Jeep and fled back to the field office. In excitement, he told the head ranger, 32-year-old James Colquitt Bowen, what had happened. Ranger Bowen looked at the torn shirt and the scratches and went to the site to see what could be determined. Sure enough, there was the tire tracks in the grass and a huge swath of broken limbs cutting through the dense foliage. Bowen was positive something massive did indeed give chase to Whaley out of the forest, back into the forest, and back out of the forest again. Quote from Ranger Bowen, very definitely something was there. Days later, Joseph mustered enough courage to return to the site with his friends, but him nor his friends were able to find any evidence of this encounter. Ranger Bowen contacted the district ranger, OLIN Witherington. Witherington called upon the sheriff of Terrell County, Zeke Matthews, to investigate it and was assured they would. However, no investigation was done because Matthews told the Atlanta Constitution, quote, if I believed there was anything to it, I would be out looking for it. The public was starting to become alarmed and wanted answers. So the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, said they determined it was a hog bear, which is basically a dwarven-sized bear. However, the people challenged this and said it was slow, it was over 6 feet tall, it had hands, it was gray, etc., etc., etc. So then, caught in this excuse, Major DELMAR Jones of the GBI provided a second story, story number 2. Jones went on to explain that a secret person, whom he couldn't give you the name so you could verify this fact, had told him what had happened and for everyone to just drop it. According to Jones, this secret person had a private lake and was tired of constantly chasing off trespassers. So, he devised a plan to end it all for good. According to Jones, quote, he wrapped himself in a sheet, borrowed a Halloween mask, and set out to haunt the fishermen. He scared the pants off the trespassers, but he also fired the imaginations of others until they began seeing monsters everywhere. Of course, this is an absurd excuse and obvious BS, but since the sighting stopped, it was not challenged. This ended the chapter of the Pig-Faced Bigfoot, or also known as the Southern Georgia Pigman. However, long before these sightings and long after these sightings, many people venturing into the swamps of South Georgia have reported seeing these pigmen. All these reports are pretty much the same, that these things are docile, and they just give you these sad puppy eyes when you encounter them. They're described as having a stinky odor smell, kind of like a skunk or a ferret, being bipedal and looking like an ape except for the facial features. The face has pig-type features, including a pig snout, pig-looking ears, and tusks protruding from the bottom of the jaw going upwards. The sightings outside of Edison and Brownwood have been in the Okanophie Swamp, Lake Seminole, along the Chattahoochee River, as far north as Columbus, just outside of Pretoria, and at Altahalma Wildlife Management Area. Alright guys, if you decide to go on an adventure of your own and go on a search for these things, even though they tend to be docile, don't forget this story and be on guard. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, which is super important, and until next time, we're off on another adventure. God bless.